We're especially honored today to present this exclusive episode of Zoom with ZOA, featuring the United States Ambassador to Israel, the Honorable Mike Huckabee, who will be properly introduced in one moment by ZOA National President Morton Klein. I am Alan Jay, National Executive Director at ZOA. Thank you, our ZOA leadership and elite donors, for joining us today. In the continuing aftermath of the heinous October 7th terrorist attack and the ongoing multi-front war Israel must continue to fight to ensure the safety and security of all Israelis, the U.S.-Israel relationship is as important as it ever has been, and the insights of our special guest could not be more timely. All microphones will remain muted for the duration of the program. Time permitting, the ambassador has graciously agreed to answer a few questions at the end of the program. Only questions submitted in the Zoom Q&A feature will be considered. Please do not put questions in the Zoom chat, and please do not be offended if we do not get to your question, as we need to be respectful of the ambassador's time. Q&A will be moderated by Director of ZOA's Government Relations Department, Dan Pollak. Before I turn the program over, please note that our annual ZOA Capitol Hill Israel Advocacy Mission in Washington, D.C. will take place 1 week from today on Thursday, June 12th. We will meet in the nation's capital at 10 a.m. Our government relations staff and ZOA President Morton Klein will host an introduction to the issues we'll be lobbying for and will give pointers for effective lobbying. We will be addressed by several members of Congress over a kosher lunch, after which we'll break into small groups to directly lobby members of the House and Senate. We have buses leaving for DC early in the morning from New York City and from Philadelphia, and I believe we can still accommodate a few late registrations. It is extremely important to make our Zionist voices heard in the Capitol, so please consider joining us. My colleague Jackie Schaefer will post the registration link in the Zoom chat. Morton Klein has been the national president and leader of the ZOA for more than 30 years. Mort has testified before Congress, gives talks across the country, and appears frequently in all major media. Mort appears regularly on Newsmax. He is frequently published in the Jerusalem Post, the Times of Israel, JNS, and has been quoted in the New York Times, the New York Post, and many more media outlets. Mort regularly speaks with senators and representatives and other policymakers and world leaders. Most recently, Mort has been traveling across the U.S., meeting with influential community leaders and giving important talks and speeches about Zionism, Israel, and combating anti-Semitism. Under Mort's leadership, ZOA has been right about all major issues facing Israel and the Jewish people: the disastrous Oslo Accords, the ill-advised Gaza disengagement, and the dangerous JCPOA, to name a few. Mort is recognized the world over as one of the most influential Zionists of our time. Here to introduce our very special guest, ZOA National President Morton Klein.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, and thank you everyone for joining us for this really extraordinary session with one of the most important Israel policymakers, pro-American, pro-Israel policymakers in the world. It's my honor and privilege to introduce to you my dear friend, my valued friend, the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. By the way, Mike Huckabee, just like ZOA, has been right about every issue since Oslo began. In fact, I wanted to mention to the ambassador, Michael Oren, who's a liberal legislator in Israel, former ambassador from Israel to the U.S., at a meeting with the Conference of Presidents in Israel in February, said, "I want to acknowledge that Morton Klein and ZOA has been right about everything." That's an exact quote from the left-wing Michael Oren. And we can say the same about Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee was the governor of Arkansas. He was named one of the top 5 governors in the country at that time. His daughter, Sarah Huckabee, is now the new governor of Arkansas. And as I was speaking to my friend Lowell Milken yesterday, he told me she is a great governor and extraordinarily fearless. It's a great admiration for her. And she just passed a law that you cannot use the term West Bank in official documents. You must say Judea and Samaria. Governor Huckabee is an ordained Southern Baptist minister. He's a great bass guitarist as well, a great musician. In 2008, he was number 2 in the number of delegates after Senator McCain in his run for the presidency. He was on the short list for vice president. In 2010, CNN and Rasmussen polls showed that he was ahead of Obama and could well have defeated Obama had he run in that year. How America and the world would be different had Governor Huckabee become the president back then instead of Obama in 2012. Recent years, he's had his own TV show on Fox, The Huckabee Show, and I was honored to be a guest on his show. He led, by the way, and brought hundreds of Christians every single year to Israel. And it was my privilege to, in most of those years, address the hundreds of people, Christians that he brought to Israel, including, by the way, the great songster Pat Boone. So it was my privilege to meet him. By the way, statements that he's made in the recent past, Governor Huckabee has made, there's no such thing as the West Bank, it's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as settlements, they're Jewish communities. There's no such thing as occupation, there's never a state of Palestine. And this past week, when France is pushing to have a Palestinian terrorist state, Governor Huckabee publicly stated, I have an idea for France. If they so much want a Palestinian state, why doesn't he carve out a part of the French Riviera and put the state there? He said that publicly and proudly. I'm also most proud that the very first ZOA Sheldon and Miri Adelson Defender of Israel Award we gave to Governor Huckabee. And after that dinner, Miri Adelson came over to me and said, it was so great having Huckabee, but how are we going to surpass that next year when we give out the second Adelson Award? She was so thrilled with Huckabee. I also might end by saying, people have said to me, weren't you upset, Mort, that you weren't made the U.S. ambassador to Israel? And I said, I was upset until I found out they chose someone more pro-Israel than I am. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Mort, thank you very much. And I want to tell everyone that Mort is one of my very favorite people in the entire world. I love the guy. I think he is one of the strongest voices, not just for Zionism, I think he's one of the strongest voices for common sense when it relates to Middle East policy. When Mort speaks, I listen. And I don't know of anyone who has been a more fearless defender of a genuine, solid policy, common sense policy, brilliant policy toward the Middle East and specifically toward Israel than Mort Klein. So he is a friend. I consider him a trusted friend and a wonderful ally. I want to affirm everything Mort said about my daughter, Sarah. I was happy to hear that Loyal Milken had made such kind remarks. I must tell you, Sarah's attitude has been, she said, Dad, I just want to be a better governor than you. To which I said, Sarah, it's a low bar. I think you've already cleared it and you're doing great. And I'm so proud of her. Proud of all my kids, but Sarah's the one in the spotlight and she is excelling. I took her to Yad Vashem when she was 11 years old. It was a transformational moment in her life as well as mine. And her deep-rooted Zionism has been based on many trips to Israel, seeing it firsthand. I did not have to indoctrinate her or tell her what to think, as I feel like I don't ever have to bring someone here and tell them what to think. I just bring them here and say, open your eyes, open your ears, look and see for yourselves, and go back home and tell people what you see. And without doubt, the tens of thousands of people that I brought to Israel since 1981 in groups always go back as strong Zionists and ambassadors for Israel and its future. So the one thing about this job that I really will miss is the ability to bring people to Israel. But here's what I'm finding out as ambassador. There are lots of people coming to see me now. So it's pretty special. Janet and I landed here just before the end of Passover in April. We've barely come up for air since we have been here. Both of us are loving the opportunity to serve President Trump and the United States of America in this position. The president called me just a few days after the election, and he said, well, he didn't ask me to come. He told me I was coming. And all of you who know President Trump know that he's not a person who asks. He just says, Mike, you're going to Israel. You're going to be my ambassador. I'd never talked to him about it, never asked him for it. Other people had mentioned to him that they thought I would be someone he ought to consider. But when he called, it's the only thing that he could have offered me in all of government that I would have said, as Isaiah, here am I, Lord, send me. Just a little background for those of you that may not know. I first came to Israel 52 years ago. It was in 1973, July of that year. I was 17, just finished high school, about to head to college. I went all over the Middle East with a friend of mine, and I loved all of the places that I visited. But when I got to Israel, there was something special. I don't know how to explain it other than it wasn't just a connection with the aesthetic value, because quite frankly, in 1973, there wasn't a lot. Israel was still a struggling country, almost third world. But what I did discover was that this was the land that God had given to his people, the Jewish people. He had given them a place, he created a people, and he gave them a purpose. And it was overwhelming just to be here then. So starting in 1981, I started bringing groups of people to Israel. And over the past several years, 52 in fact, I've been here over 100 times. A few weeks ago, and Janet and I had been here a few weeks, we were talking late one night, and we were just discussing how that normally we would come to Israel with a group, we'd be here 2 weeks, we'd go back home. We'd be here 2 weeks, we'd go back home. We'd bring a group, stay 2 weeks, we'd go back home. That night we looked at each other and said, this time after 2 weeks, we're not going home. We are home. And I can tell you, it truly feels like we are exactly where we're supposed to be. I love living here. I know that may sound strange to some people who think, must be strange going to a foreign country and living there. Actually, it's not that foreign to me because I've been here so much. I told someone that it's the only place the president could have sent me that I didn't need to get a tourist map to figure out where I was or how to get around. And it's been a delightful experience. And I've said to many groups here in Israel, and I'll say it to you now because it's the truth, I'd rather live in Jerusalem every day of the week and twice on Sunday than to live in Washington, D.C. and babysit some bloated bureaucracy. So I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I couldn't be more delighted. Having kind of said that, I want to get into some of the issues that we are facing every day here at the embassy, every day as ambassador. Look, I knew coming into this position, it was not a ceremonial ambassadorship. I recognized that the extraordinary timing of my coming here in the middle of a war, hostage negotiations, the threats of Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu sometimes talks about a 7-front war that Israel faces. I would suggest this 8-front war, the 8th front being the incredibly biased and negative news media that makes sometimes the American press almost look tame. But it's also the American press that has been very misleading to the point that this past week I had to call them out because they were saying that on Sunday with the humanitarian feeding process, that the IDF soldiers had shot and killed 20-something people who were trying to line up for food. We all knew it was a lie. We had first-person eyewitness people on the ground in the middle of it. They said there were no shots fired. There was nobody that was killed at the feeding site. There was no chaos, and it was all untrue. And interestingly, I called out specifically the Washington Post, CNN, BBC, the Associated Press. And a couple of days later, the Washington Post actually retracted their story because their source for the original story was, you guessed it, Hamas, the Palestinian Health Authority, which is a Hamas-run entity. And they ran with the press release from Hamas as if they could trust it. The only other source they had was Al Jazeera, both of whom are pro-Hamas, committed to Hamas, and they never mentioned hostages, the slaughter of 1,200 Jews on October the 7th, or the ongoing torture of those hostages over 600 days. I was disgusted. And I feel like that sometimes one of the biggest challenges that Israel faces is not only the existential threats that it gets from Iran, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, but also the threats that come to it by virtue of a very blind, one-sided, monolithic media that, for reasons that make no sense, really demonstrate their anti-Semitic bias to a point that it is beyond disgusting. I've spent a lot of time with the Prime Minister since I've been here. It's not my job to advocate for the government of Israel. My job is to advocate for the United States. I'm here by the appointment and serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States. I wake up every morning. The first thing I do, I check his Twitter account. I want to see if I still have my job. Because as you know, sometimes if President Trump is no longer pleased with you, he announces it in a tweet to the world. So I check, and it's sort of like checking your obituary just to make sure you're alive. I check his Twitter account, make sure I still have a job. And if I do, I get dressed and I go through what is a very full, busy day, and most of the time into the night. There are times I'm at the Prime Minister's office till well after midnight. The job, as I said at the beginning, is intense. We're in the middle of a war. We have all sorts of threats. There have been, I don't know how many times, numerous times, that the sirens go off. And if I'm at home, Janet and I and the two dogs, we head to the shelter and we wait until the threat is over. If I'm at the embassy, the entire embassy staff very methodically leaves what they're doing and they go to the shelter. Most of my friends in America have no idea that Israel is under a daily threat, and the sirens go off somewhere in this country almost every single day. They've gone off enough in Jerusalem, where we live, that it's become a regular occurrence. I'll give you a little anecdote. The other night, Ambassador Tom Barrack, who is the ambassador to Turkey, he was here. We were meeting about the situation in Syria. And we had a meeting late, I guess it was Tuesday night, with the director of the Mossad, David Barnea. So we're sitting there in the middle of the meeting, and all of a sudden, the sirens go off. Tom looks at me like, what's that? I said, Tom, this is an everyday thing in Israel. He went with us. We all went down to the basement, and we waited for a little while. We came back, and Tom looked at me, he said, does this happen often? I said, pretty much every day somewhere. Yes. And I said, when you talk to the president, be sure to remind him what I have told him, and that is that there is a definite, deadly threat to the people of Israel every single day. And do remind him that 700,000 Americans live in Israel. Let me put that in perspective for you. 700,000 Americans. I first heard that number and I thought, is that an extra zero there? No, that's how many Americans are living in Israel. That's an actual number from our consulate. We keep up with these numbers because if something should really go wrong, it's our job to figure out if people want to leave, how do we help get them out of here? So knowing what a challenge that would be, we take very seriously the responsibility that we have as an embassy to serve the American public who are here in Israel. I want to give a perspective, though. That's more Americans living overseas in any country on the planet except for Mexico. Now let that sink in. Mexico is next door neighbor to the United States. It borders a number of U.S. states, large in population, from California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. So it's natural that you would think that Mexico would have a lot of Americans living there. But you would think that the second country might be Canada, the UK, Italy, France, but it isn't. It's Israel. And 700,000 people represent an entire congressional district. So once again, as I've said to all the people back in Washington, including the president, just know that any threat to Israel is also a threat to Americans who live here. Americans have been held hostage. Americans were murdered on October the 7th, and Americans are at risk every single day. But despite all of those things that cause some of my friends to say, are you okay? Do you feel safe? To which I say, I feel perfectly safe. I know I'm in God's land. I'm surrounded by God's people. If something happens, I'm going to get there faster than you because I'm a lot close to headquarters being here in Jerusalem. So I don't worry about it. We live our lives with joy and excitement, and we live our lives with a real sense that we are here by divine appointment. Let me express to you that there are challenges that Israel faces that are truly, truly humongous. I wish more Americans understood that our relationship with Israel is unlike any that we have on the planet. Truly, America has friends, we have allies, but we only have one partner, and our one partner is Israel. By partner, I emphasize that it's not just an alliance, it is a true partnership in that we share levels of intelligence, the likes of which is unprecedented with any country. With no other country do we share this level of intelligence. With no other country do we share military capacity in terms of the use of hardware, coordination of the various means of defense. And there's also another, maybe more important factor of all. There's no other nation on earth with whom we share a greater sense of our shared values that originate from a Judeo-Christian foundation that is the very foundation of all of Western civilization. This is something that many Americans just simply don't fully comprehend. When I hear Americans say, well, we do so much for Israel, I usually punch back and say, but are you aware of what Israel does for us? It is a two-way street. It's not all to the benefit of Israel. It's much to the benefit of the United States. So my primary job, representing the United States to the people of Israel and to the Americans who live here. But the other part of that is to carry the message of our relationship to our own citizens here and around the world. And I do that with a real sense of exhilaration, because when I'm able to express to people how this partnership benefits America every single day, I hope that it is a counter to some of the nonsense that I hear from even leading voices of influential people, some of whom who say, America has no business getting involved with Israel at all. They're going to be asking us to fight their wars. To which I say that is a lie. That is an outright lie. Since 1948, in every war they've been a part of, their War of Independence in 1948, the 1956 war with Egypt, 1967 against most all of the Middle East nations, 1973, 1982 in Lebanon, the Intifadas, the war of 2014 with Hamas in Gaza, and the war that they're currently undergoing. Not one time in all of that, even when they were fighting for their very survival, did the Israelis ever ask American soldiers to put their boots on the ground and fight the fight for Israel. Yes, we've shared hardware. Yes, we've shared intelligence, military capability, but we have never been asked, nor have we ever rendered military presence in a fighting capacity for the state of Israel. And the reason why? Because Israel fights for itself. It understands that they may be alone, but they must fight because they have, as Golda Meir so brilliantly said in 1973, when asked, what is the secret weapon of Israel when it can win wars that it shouldn't win? She simply said, because we have nowhere else to go. I'm proud to be one of those Americans, not even Jewish, that stand with Israel for its right to have a sovereign, safe, and secure nation, and to be able to bring America's friendship on a first-person basis to our friends who live here. I've mentioned a moment ago that I spent a lot of time with the Prime Minister. Let me put it in perspective for you. I think I've spent more time with the Prime Minister here than I have spent with my own wife since we have arrived. I even told him a couple of weeks ago, I said, Mr. Prime Minister, if I spend any more time with you, I am going to insist that you put me on your family health care policy as a dependent, because I feel like that I have earned the right to be on your plan. But I do it with a sense of great opportunity to be able to keep the relationship strong. I know there have been rumors that somehow the United States and Israel are getting a divorce, that we're not getting along. Let me just tell you, that is a lie. It's another lie that gets told over and over by the media, fanned and flamed into all sorts of stories that come from both the U.S. and Israel. But I was speaking to the World Jewish Congress 2 weeks ago, and I said to them, as I will say to you now, there is no truth to this nonsense that the U.S. and Israel are having problems, not getting along, about to split up, go through a divorce. I said, let me tell you why there will never be a divorce between Israel and the United States. Because quite frankly, neither of us could afford to pay the alimony if we split up. We are that committed to each other. And it is a relationship, just like my marriage. I've been married 51 years as of 2 weeks ago. And, you know, my wife and I, we don't agree on every single thing that ever comes our way. But what we do agree on is that we have an inseparable partnership that cannot be broken except by death. And that's because we made a vow, not just to each other, but a vow to God, and we've kept it. And sometimes it's been hard. But through 51 years of marriage, we have never considered divorce. Murder? Oh, yeah, many times. But divorce never crossed our mind. And I really believe in many ways the people of Israel need to relax and calm down. America's not mad at you. And to the people of America, I would say to you, don't fear that our country is abandoning Israel. I see no signs of that. I want to mention that I think President Trump has led us to the precipice of something extraordinary. Sometimes he will do things or he will say things that confound people, maybe surprise them, maybe even scare them. But here's what I can tell you without giving details that I cannot share because some of the information is highly classified. We are on the brink, thanks to his leadership, of seeing a complete reset of the Middle East. And when that happens, it's a reset of the world. There are certainly pieces of it that are delicate and fragile, and it requires an extraordinary amount of diplomatic and personal skill to make it all work. But President Trump has come into office in this second term with a history of having been the most pro-Israel president in all of American history. His moving the embassy to Jerusalem, historic. Everyone told him not to do it, but he did it anyway. And I asked him why a couple of weeks after he announced it. I'll never forget what he told me. It was just the two of us. We were at the White House. And I asked him, why'd you do it? Everybody told you not to. He looked at me and he simply said, because I said I would, and it was the right thing to do. And I thought, what a brilliant, brilliant assessment of how it's supposed to be. I'm grateful that he recognized the Golan Heights as being part of Israel, that he no longer believed that building communities in Judea and Samaria was a violation of international law, which it is most certainly not. He recognized Jerusalem as the undivided, undisputed, indigenous, eternal capital of the Jewish state. I want to close my portion and then throw it open to questions with this just sort of moment to say I was first announced and I was so concerned that people would say, but he's not even Jewish. What kind of ambassador could he be? Much to my delight, people from both the United States and Israel have actually been so supportive to a point that I could never have imagined. And I've wondered about it, but I've heard it several times, that if I were Jewish, people would say, yeah, of course he's a Zionist. I mean, what's he going to do? He's got to be for Israel. But my passion as a Zionist and as an American who loves Israel is not because I have to, it's because I choose to, out of the depths of my heart from having seen this country over 52 years and realizing that the only explanation for the success of this great nation is that God has his hand on Israel. I believe in Genesis 12. Those who bless Israel will be blessed. Those who curse Israel will be cursed. I want America to be on the side of God's blessing. And so I proudly serve in this position. And I'm grateful. And I hope when you come to Israel, I'll have a chance to say hello to you. And I also pray that you continue to be the strongest voice in the Jewish world for Zionism. Morton, Klein, and ZOA is the gold standard. I mean, it really is. If I want to know what I need to think about an issue regarding Israel, I look and see what Mort's saying about it. I may not always say it quite as strong as Mort, because he's so gentle, as you know. But generally, I do say it as strong as Mort because I value his courage, I value his convictions, and I appreciate the ZOA more than you can ever know. As I say, it is the gold standard of Jewish organizations. With that, Dan, I'll turn it over to you. I think you're going to field some questions for me, and I'll do the best I can to either answer them or avoid them very skillfully. We'll see how it goes.
Thank you very much and happy anniversary. That's 51 years is something. Mort, did you want to ask a question before I got started?
Yes, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. That was the most heartfelt, inspiring, personal ZOA Zoom message we've ever had among all the major officials we've had on this Zoom call. It was really extraordinary. And thinking about your career and your message today, I'm reminded of a top Republican chair, you may remember Chip Saltzman, who said that Mike Huckabee is the most successful post-presidential candidate in the history of our country. And you've made that crystal clear, that truth. My question is, we understand negotiations with Iran, you're not dealing with a real estate deal. They're not looking for the most money or the best deal. They are following the strict interpretation of the Quran. That's what makes it so difficult. You're dealing with fanatical Islamists. How close is Iran to nukes, if you can tell us? And how close before the U.S. will finally end what I believe are fruitless negotiations with these radical Muslims? And will the United States support Israel in whatever decision they make with respect to confronting Iran? Thank you.
Morton, let me keep my answer within the context of what I can say, things that have been in the public record, obviously things that are learned in classified settings I can't discuss, but there's enough that I can. First of all, I agree that the Iranians pose an existential threat, but not just to Israel. And this is what I try to keep saying. Their threat starts with Israel, but it continues until they have annihilated the United States, which has been for 46 years their stated goal. Get rid of the little Satan, Israel, and then go after the great Satan, the United States. Israel is just the appetizer. The United States is the entree. And for Americans to think, well, what's happening with Iran and Israel? It has nothing to do with me. That is such an idiotic, ignorant, and ill-informed understanding that I hope that every single one of us will continue to push back when we hear that nonsense. Because if you've ever listened to what the Iranians have said, and they've said it consistently for 46 years without any change whatsoever, their ultimate goal is to destroy the United States. Now, someone said, well, they can't do that. Oh, really? If they get nuclear weapons and a long-range ballistic missile, they will reach out and touch. And I hope that Americans are not so naive to think that when someone tells you for 46 years they're going to kill you, you really ought to take them seriously. It has been reported in the press just this weekend that the International Atomic Energy Committee has determined that Iran has already exceeded what they were saying that they had in nuclear enrichment, to a point that they are probably 1 or 2 weeks away from being able to weaponize nuclear material for up to 10 nuclear bombs. Now that ought to get our undivided attention. I recognize that there is an intense process to try to bring a peaceful resolution to the idea of nuclear weapons in the hands of the Iranians. But I take the words of the president more seriously than any other words. He has said repeatedly, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. They won't. They won't have the capacity for it. They won't have enrichment. They will have to totally dismantle their nuclear devices. Now, that's what he has said. That's not my policy, that's his. And as I tell people, I'm not here to give my policy. I didn't get elected. He got elected. He makes the policy. I carry it out. I deliver the message. Or another way to put it, he's the chemist. He makes the medicine. I'm just the pharmacist. I dispense it. But what I can dispense is what the president has repeatedly said. They will not have a nuclear weapon. So maybe you ask, why even bother to negotiate? I think it's because the president would like to believe that there is a diplomatic solution, that somehow Iran would recognize that they're not in a position that they want to take on Israel, the United States, and the rest of the world. And it would be in their best interest to forget their nuclear aspirations. Now, do I believe that they are negotiating in good faith, that they would come to an agreement? And if they even came to an agreement, would they keep it? My personal view is, watching them for 46 years, no, I don't believe it. But by going through the process, the president can say to the world, we did everything we could to try to bring this to a peaceful conclusion at the negotiating table. What would the president do? What would the U.S. do? What would Israel do if these talks ultimately stall? How long will we be patient with them? I think if you know the president, he's patient only up to a point. And then when he feels like that he's being gamed and there's no solution in the future, this is not a president who wastes a lot of extra time hoping that suddenly something will change. So what I'm saying by all that is, we don't know exactly when and where, but I take the president seriously, and I would advise the Iranians to take the president seriously. They will not have a nuclear weapon.
Thank you. This is probably in the same category. You don't make the policy, but is there any reason or indication to believe that Hamas will ever return all of the hostages?
Not unless they're forced to, because Hamas has been uncivilized in everything they've done. They've tortured the hostages. The fact that they took them in the first place, that they've kept them for over 600 days, that they've kept the remains of even those they murdered, that they've slaughtered, massacred over 1,200 people on October the 7th, and have repeatedly said publicly that they would do it again if they had the opportunity. So they can never be given the opportunity. And I again quote the president. He has said they have no future in Gaza. They will not be there, and they will not govern there. And when I hear idiots from the UK and France talk about, well, they ought to just say it's been too long and hard a process, let's call it off, let's just let it be a draw. First of all, that is giving a victory to Hamas that would be absolutely abominable. But the other thing that it would do, it would encourage and incentivize this same kind of activity from happening again and again and again, more hostage taking, more massacres of innocent people. Why would we risk that? But ultimately, I say to the Europeans, how many of you would think that it would have been the proper course somewhere in 1944 to say this world war has just gone too long and it's been too costly? We're going to just call it a draw. We're going to let the Nazis stay in Germany and in power. They just have to calm down a little bit. Would anyone in his or her right mind say that that was a legitimate way for World War II to end? And the Brits ought to know their own history better. They bombed Dresden into oblivion, and there were many civilians who lost their lives because of it. But it was only because Winston Churchill and not Neville Chamberlain was Prime Minister of Great Britain did he understand that you can't appease the Nazis, you can't come to terms with them, you must eliminate them. And that's exactly how we need to view Hamas.
I think you're running out of time. Do we have time for a very quick question from our national treasurer, Bob Gazzardi? That's a yes or no for you, Ambassador.
Yes, we'll go ahead, sure.
So he wants to know if in your discussions, we understand that they're confidential, if your discussions with President Trump, ZOA or Mort ever comes up, and if your opinion has been conveyed, and if the president has responded in kind about ZOA.
You know, we've never had, that I can recall, a direct conversation about ZOA, but I do know that he respects Mort, he respects ZOA. He's been a person that has had interactions with Mort Klein for many, many years. And how would you ignore Morton Klein? I mean, how would you do that? It's not possible. You have to listen, you have to take him seriously. So I have a feeling that the president cares very deeply about what the members of ZOA think and how Mort is articulating it, which is more effective than anyone I can think of. It's why I value his opinion, because it's based on well-educated empirical evidence and not just emotional feeling. We have enough people out there with a lot of emotion, as it might be said, they have a lot of heat, but no light. What we need is people with light. And I've always trusted that Mort Klein not only brought heat to the game, but he brought light. And it's one of the reasons that I consider it such an honor to have been here with you tonight on this webinar.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mort, you're on
Thank you.
mute.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you, and God bless you all.